Thank you very much. Before we start, I want to talk to you about something I was told the other day, which was really quite alarming. It's a substance called dihydrogen monoxide. Every cancerous tumour, when they've done the autopsy, they've found this substance in it. It's used in pesticides. It's a highly corrosive acid. Almost nothing on Earth is safe against dihydrogen monoxide. It's fatal if inhaled. Politicians from Canada to New Zealand have demanded that water should be banned. Yep, that sums up the public and political understanding about water today. So why bother? What I'm going to talk about, first of all, where do I come in all of this? Why bother about water? Okay, today 169 million people have to shit in the open in towns and cities in the world. It means that girls don't go to school because there are no lavatories at their school. They're humiliated at having to be shitting in the open. 800 million people face fundamental water scarcity in the world today. 870 million people do not have access to safe water today, which means 3 to 5 million people a year die of waterborne diseases. 500 million life years are lost in the world every year due to waterborne illness, and 2.6 billion people a year do not have safe sanitation because people don't give a damn. But we are doers. And it's going to be a grumpy little talk, but this is all about the power of the positive. Okay, what are the 7 sorry cliches I'm going to look at? First of all, water should be free. Keep the private sector away. You always have to have an exclamation mark after this, because every book and every paper about the private sector and water finishes in an exclamation mark. It's one of the laws of physics. We can't afford for everybody to have water. It's just too expensive. Bottled water is cool, yeah. Wastewater is pollution, really. And there's no such thing as climate change. Big yawn. Oh, and don't forget the other one, water wars. But there's something else. Do. Doer. What's the Welsh for water? Dŵr. Dŵr. Water. Doer, doer, doer. And this is where I come from. Where do I come from? Yes, I briefly had a beard, but that's another story. I was into biology in the 70s and 80s and environmentalist when it was very untrendy. I got into a bird called the chough, and I spent 4 happy years on Ynyslochtin, which is about 15 miles north of here, looking at the ecology and the behaviour of the chough. I didn't want a career, I wanted a calling, which of course meant I was unemployable. And I ended up grovelling around looking for a job in the city, and I went to a very pucker merchant bank. And I thought, no, I've been told this is a great place to work for. So I went into the room, and these 3 raptors looked across the room at me. And one of them went, have you ever thought of working in industry? Might be more suitable for you. Well, funnily enough, I didn't fancy working for them. So I got into another company, and I found out afterwards why they recruited me, because all the graduate trainees were given a briefing about the people they were going to talk to, and on me they put bright but weird. And anyway, one day I was in the train, my mother was jabbering away to me on the phone, and we used to have these screens up with stock information on them. You get a blue line which tells you the company announcement, and that became saying, Raycall to float off, Raycall telecom, and jabber, 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 and my mother, fuck! Darling, do you want me to go off the phone? Yes, please. And I hit what they call I hit what they call the stentophone, which is the sort of office microphone. It goes, links up everybody. And I said, Raycall selling, Raycall Telecom, this is the Rambo buy. I repeat, a Rambo buy. And one of the jobbers comes up, Dive, what's a Rambo buy? And I eyeballed and went, sell your mother, sell your house, sell your clothes, buy Raycall. Got the message, Dive? White socks everywhere around the room. Buy Raycall, buy Raycall. In 30 seconds, I had justified my entire 2 years there. I left to join another outfit, Banque Paribas, where I realised that the next... By the way, Raycall became Vodafone, and I got into trouble for predicting that 2 million people would use mobile phones by 2000. Yeah, I was wrong, but the other way. Anyway, I realised that the next Raycall was a company called General des Eaux in France, so I had to learn about the water sector. And that was great. I started really getting into water. One day I took a friend of mine to the opera, and along comes a hawk who happened to work for the same company as Roz, and he said to, hello, Roz, and he looked at me and said, oh, we've met before, haven't you? And I said, yeah, I remembered you when I turned the headhunter from your bank down. And anyway, so that was a bit of a flop for him. And unfortunately, I got a bit sort of pissed off with stockbroking and everything, can't imagine why, and had my obligatory existential crisis and went off to a place called Ladakh in the Indian Himalayas. One day I drank water from a bad source and put in the old tablets, diarrhea, vomiting. Next morning, not in a good way. The Nawang, who looked after the guest house, took me out to find a car to get me to the hospital, and the buildings are now starting to flash red and green. By the time I got to the hospital, I'm still not sure if it's happening, but I think I was watching myself from across the room, and then when they took me into a ward, I asked them, what are the sheep doing in the ward? Anyway, when I came round the next day, they weren't sheep, they were just rats, which was a great relief. But that taught me a great lesson in life, that the water matters. If that's what happens to me with one unlucky incident, what about those 800 million people who have to deal with that every day? So I got into water consulting. I'd had enough of the reductionist shareholder value movement in the city. And in a sense, I had one of my great moments there. I was going to Jakarta, and the river in Jakarta actually bubbles. It's anoxic. And everywhere, people are selling bottled water because there was no safe water. I was there for 22 hours in 1996, and I knew there was going to be a revolution in a year's time, and of course there was. If you can't have that level of life, it's just unsustainable. Later that year, I met a nice young lady, and she said, can I come and see you in Wales? Now, when I was doing my 4 years of field work, I saw 29 chuffs, the largest number. So I took her to Lockton, and 57 chuffs turned up. Suffice to say, we got married, and we, in a good augury, and we came back here, bought a farm, come back to where my family lived, and on the way, we met a lot of cans and don'ts. But now, we're meeting doers. So, what I want to talk to you about is those great, horrible cliches. Water must be free. Yeah, sure, and get free cholera with every glass. The other great argument we have is water's a gift from God. So that means, I guess, the shit's a gift from the devil, isn't it? Yeah, the problem is, especially in developing countries, it's not a problem. The wealthy, the connected, the powerful get cheap water. They get subsidised water. The poor, they pay full cost recovery with knobs on. Because they're not connected to the taps, they pay between 6 and 240 times more. It's the most expensive water in the world for the poorest people in the world. 1 billion people live in slums today. Because they don't own their property, they're not voters. They're disconnected from water, they're disconnected from power. Access to safe, affordable water is the basic human right. But the current setup in most municipalities and most countries, if you're not a voter, you don't matter. You're not human. We have to break that statist paradigm. What are we going to do about it? Well, we have to keep looking and bashing at these cliches. So, no private water. Really? Great. Just one little problem with this. Where that paradigm works, generally speaking, the public don't matter. For example, there's one campaigning organisation which opposes any private sector involvement. Who's it sponsored by? Trade unions. Of course it is. In Calcutta, they have 50,000 people working on the water board. They only connect 1 million people, 20 people each worker. They're not there to provide water, they're there to provide employment. We must break that construct. Water companies, water utilities are here to serve people, not themselves. In Manila, when that was taken out to the private sector, 1.6 million slum connectors, the unconnected, the unvoting, were connected. The previous setup, the state setup, had ignored them for 120 years. We broke the paradigm. Of course, there are crap private companies, no end of them. My favourite was Enron, who had an outfit called Azurix. They said they were going to revolutionise the world of water transfers, and they set up this incredible internet-based trading platform called water2water.com. Look it up in the internet today. You find it sells fish pond accessories. So it's not necessarily a case of having to have the private sector, but it's the mentality of service that matters. Corporatised utilities. It has transformed the performance and the public sense of duty and obligation in Uganda, in Phnom Penh. They're still government run, they're still government owned, but they now have a mentality which is to serve the customer, not themselves. It's not politics, it's business. It's a part, it's not the whole. But there's an interesting thing behind this. Let's take a look at choice. In India, 360 million people are connected to sewage. 650 million have mobile phones. There's a gap between the two, isn't it? 37 million have fixed phones. The politicians are scared to provide sewage because they're scared of the costs involved. Mobile phones, simply a matter of choice. People want to buy mobile phones. People want to buy water. People want to buy sewage, but they're not allowed to. Fixed line phones, 37 million, because that, again, is a government business. But you only get it if you're a mate, if you know someone in politics, if you're prepared to pay a bribe to have a phone. Enterprising approaches to water and sanitation can break the sick clichés which drag us all down and humiliate so many people today. Okay, we can't afford water. Well, I would say we can't afford to be without it. One of the reasons why attempts to have universal water for all and sanitation for all have been abandoned repeatedly is it's too expensive. It would cost $600 to $800 billion on my calculations to provide basic water and sanitation for all, and perhaps another $1 trillion to give a proper full Western service. We can't afford it. Do you know how much it costs to bail out those 4 obsolete car makers in Detroit? $60 billion. They showed so much humility that each of them came in a separate private jet to ask for the money. So 1/10 of the current problem could have been done, but instead was keeping 4 failing, obsolete manufacturers to carry on failing. Okay, can we afford universal access? The British government spent £850 billion bailing out the banks. The US TARP bank bailout, $700 billion just on the official part of it. So, if you're down to your last helicopter, if your yacht is less than 30 metres long, the government will bail you out. But they can't afford to give you water. And yet, it makes dazzlingly good business sense. According to the World Health Organization, $80 billion a year can be saved by access to water and sanitation because people are living, people are working, people are living lives more efficiently. Where we've had basic projects to connect people to water and sanitation, that investment is paid back 2 to 7 times over within a year. That's the sort of desire people have to have a decent life, but they are denied that decent life. And the risk is a fascinating one in water. To save a single life by connecting people to safe water and safe sewage costs between £2,000 and £5,000. That's good value, I think, especially when in America it costs lives saved by pesticides Well, to put in the infrastructure to prevent people from getting poisoned by those horrible pesticides, it costs between $500,000 for the cheapest type of pesticide removal technology, $500,000 per life saved, to $4 billion per life saved. Personally, I think a person at $2,000 is better value than a person at $4 billion. Okay, the next cliche, bottled water is better. Let me tell you about liquid spunk. Liquid spunk was going to be the term used by an American company who wanted to sell bottled water in Britain. They wanted us to drink liquid spunk. Come again? Well, I mean, the thing about that, they were going to take water from the Thames, treat it, increase the cost from 0.09p a litre to 99p a litre. Yeah, and they did add value. They put a toxin in, benzol, and as a result, they never actually got it onto sale. So that was a seminal lesson in water management. But the thing is, in 2012, it's estimated that $66 billion a year are going to be spent on bottled water. More money is spent in bottled water in California than on tap water. I don't say ban tap water, I say bottled water, I say understand it. It's all about choice. When people are not allowed the choice to invest in decent water, sometimes they're forced to drink bottled water. But there are other things we can do. We do have choice. In Kenya, 12 million people have water coming out of a household tap, but 20 million have mobile phones. Choice. It costs those with mobile phones 15% of their household income to have that mobile phone. But if you're connected to the water network, it costs you 1% of your household income. The problem is that phone costs you $15, but to connect to the state-owned water network costs you $300. So, again, it's choice. The desire is there. People have the right to spend what they want to do. Let them spend it on water and wastewater. Wastewater is pollution. Yeah, this is the good one. I actually think that wastewater is a resource. I remember the first time I went to China and there was a public loo and I needed a crap, and I was walking up to it and I realised that this was going to be a bad experience when upwind from the loo, not just downwind, but upwind, people were laying turds in the open. They were going to the loo, but they just could not face going inside. Actually, wastewater is a resource. It's packed full of water. It's packed full of energy. You go to Ladakh and you see their local loos there. They use dry composting, no pollution, and they create a resource. And of course, one of the great sources of energy in Ladakh is yak dung. They recognise, the traditional ways of dealing with water, recognise the intrinsic worth of water and the intrinsic worth of wastewater. We can't afford to be choosy about water and wastewater. Southeast England has the same water availability per capita as Syria. 55% of rainfall which hits the ground in Southeast England is used already. They are thirsty. And Singapore, on the other hand, they've closed the gap. Now, 15% of their water now comes from reclaimed water. But the moment you get the politicians in, especially in Australia, they say, "No, mate, we don't want poo in our water." And funny enough, they come back the next year and they're begging for it. Because do you want to die of thirst or do you want to make stupid political comments? Of course, the politicians usually win. That's their job. So what I say to you is close the water cycle. Close out prejudice. It works in nature and it can work for us. Climate change. We're getting to my favourite sort of things. In the water sector, there hasn't been a debate about climate change for the last 10 years. We are too busy dealing with it. It's here, it's now. It's not about probability, it's not about risk. It's about Cockermouth. It's about Southeast England. It's about the droughts in Australia. It's about the floods in Pakistan. It's here, it's now. Now, the funny thing about climate change denialists is that usually they went and had an education either in Latin and Greek or economics. And I'd say one thing to every climate change denier. If you break a limb, or you have a brain tumour, just do one thing for me. Please go and tell the doctors I insist that I don't believe in scientists and I'll be operated on someone who has a training in classics or economics, nothing else. We'll see how committed they are to scientific process. So it's happening, we've screwed up, and we have to adapt or die. The final great cliché then is water wars or water peace. Actually, the funny old thing about water wars is there's no such thing as a water war. It's never actually happened. It is a dangerous cliché. It's a lazy cliché. We have conflicts, but people can't afford to poison water which flows downstream. It's a proxy for other people's problems. And it comes back to what we want to pay on war and peace. The Iraq War has cost America so far $740 billion. Or the price of connecting everybody to water and wastewater worldwide. Which would have done the better for America? Connecting everybody to water and wastewater, or fighting a war which has been rather, to say the least, inconclusive? Water war or water peace? The America of 70 years ago, they had the Marshall Plan. And that Marshall Plan was to reconstruct Europe, to make a Europe of peace and stability. 50% of people in the Netherlands didn't have sewerage until the Marshall Plan. That's where the Americans, that great, brave, warrior nation, connected the people of Netherlands to the sewage system. And the legacy of peace lasts with us today. Amartya Sen, in his idea of justice, said that there are obligations for people in power. If something is good, if something is doable, that is something you should seriously consider. It is the moral imperative of every engineer. It is the moral imperative of everybody in the business of water. It is the obligation of power. Access to water is just about power. It's about empowerment. It's about making people's lives worthwhile and dignified. It's about being doable. It's about being a doer. Thank you very much.